Good evening or good afternoon to everyone. I will try to put the screen. Hopefully it will work right away.
Good evening, sister.
Good evening, everyone. Is it okay? Do you see the screen?
Yes, sister.
Good evening, Sister Helen.
Good evening, Sister Helen.
Nice to see you all.
Good evening, Sister.
Yes.
Good evening, sister.
So, okay, can I start?
Yeah.
Padayon na.
Okay, so today we will look at Montfort growth in wisdom. Oy. No, it's too fast. What is that? Okay. In our world today, where individualism is spreading, many are tempted to believe that we can gain wisdom in isolation. We easily hear, I just have to retreat myself with a bunch of books and read a lot, and then I will be wise. Or I will grow in wisdom by doing life my own way. Or if I can only avoid pain and suffering, I will be able to grow in wisdom. But as the beautiful song says, no one can live as an island, journeying through life alone. Of course, there is nothing wrong in personal study, in reading books to gain more knowledge. And we know that Montfort did a lot. But we do not grow in wisdom isolated from the world. Montfort was never alone, except during his moments of intense prayer, like in the forest of Mervan, when he was longing for wisdom, and in Paris, under the stairs, Rue du Pot de Fer. He knew very well the need of living with others to obtain divine wisdom, and his whole life he was praying and searching for companion to journey with him. Wisdom is not just about being knowledgeable, but also about having the ability to apply that knowledge in a way that is beneficial and meaningful. To grow and obtain wisdom is the skill to apply God's truth to real life. We know that we can grow in wisdom, whether it is through seeking knowledge and understanding, embracing humility and gratitude, or learning from our experiences. And that is what Montfort did since his childhood. In this presentation, and I am very much aware that there are many other ways to present the topic, but I chose to look at 3 ways in which Montfort grew in wisdom during different events of his life. And what we will see tonight, it is Montfort grew in wisdom through, first, a challenging community, then through obedience, then through trials. But first of all, let us remind ourselves that Louis spent the years of his childhood surrounded with nature in the manor house of Bois Marquet. And in the book of Benedetta Papazogli, she says, the first great schoolmistress of the firstborn son of the Grignons is the countryside itself. It gives the boy a strong and lasting sense of realism, teaches him both calmness and freedom, strength, and gentleness, a longing hope, and the presence of wisdom in very simple things. This experience of beauty of nature at an early age is probably at the origin of the love of Montfort for the hidden place in the middle of the forest of Mervent, where he finds the presence of God in the midst of his chaotic life. Okay, so let us look at the three aspects that I just announced to you a while ago. First of all, Montfort grew in wisdom through a challenging community. And we will look at three moments of the life of Montfort. I just tell you before we continue that it will not be chronologically, because after the other topic, we might go back to moments that are not fitting with the chronology. So the challenging family, we will see the family of Montfort, then his studies in college and seminary, then his years of service in the General Hospital of Poitiers. First of all, his family. As a small child, oh, sorry. The problem, I don't see the last line down because of the screen. So I cannot read the last line down. I don't know if there is anything to do. Anyway, in France, the Grignon family is described as a strongly Christian family whose faith is serious, even austere. A faith that regulates the day-to-day life and behavior of the people. As the firstborn, Louis suffers more than his siblings from the tensions in the daily life of the family. Louis seems to have a privileged relationship with his mother, whom he consoles when his father bursts in anger. He shows a rich sensitivity, especially with the suffering of others. And going to the church of Effendic every Sunday with his family and living in a religious atmosphere contributed to the growth of Louis' faith with love and fear of God. As a small child, his attraction to prayer is spontaneous, and we know that. He feels the need to be with God, sometimes in a quiet corner of the house. At other times, he goes outside, rosary in hand, to kneel before an outdoor shrine of Our Lady. Louis has a deep and serious desire to communicate his faith and to lead others to prayer. And this is what he did with his younger sister, Guyon-Jeanne. And we remember very well this very cute passage when he was telling his sister, if you love God very much, you will be very beautiful when you grow up, and everybody will love you. And this we could see that it is already a tangible sign of growth in wisdom at early age, and the desire to apply God's truth in his daily life. The second aspect is the challenging community during his time in college and seminary. During his college years in St. Thomas Becket College in Rennes, life is hard and challenging, especially for the young boy Louis, who is 12 years old, whose personality is marked by shyness, calmness, deep faith, and seriousness in his studies. Many times he is humiliated by his classmates and other pupils, mimicked in cruel ways, in order to ridicule this devoted and religious student who seems different from them. But he never showed signs of impatience. His friend, Jean-Baptiste Blin, just said, his deep piety began to come to light and shine out among his frivolous fellow pupils. We also know that Louis enrolled himself in the Sodality of Our Lady, that is an apostolic movement of lay people under the protection of Mary. And this experience transformed Louis' interior life into dynamic outward actions, visiting the prison and the hospital, teaching catechism, etc. At the age of 19, Louis wants to follow Christ more closely and answers his call to priesthood. He wants to make a radical choice between the world and the gospel beatitude of poverty. And at the beginning of the winter, Louis leaves his family, his loved ones, his countryside, and walks courageously to cross the bridge of Cesson. His friend Blain writes, "From this time forward, he gave himself over to divine providence, leaving all his troubles behind. Confidently and peacefully. The thought that God might not care for him never entered his head. The money and the fine clothes he gave to the beggar are superfluous in the eyes of Louis, now trembling both with cold and joy." This is in the book of Benedetta Papazogli. His gesture is both a breaking with the past and a liberation for the future. In doing so, Louis lays the cornerstone for his personal edifice. The old man is set aside. Sorry, I cannot read the last sentence. So, can you see it? The last sentence?
No.
Oh, sister, we cannot see it. Anyway, you
Because
can
of
say
that,
simply, yes.
I do not know what to do because of the black things at the bottom.
Maybe
No
just
problem,
highlight
sister.
and small.
Just continue.
Anyway. Then the last event, the challenging community in the General Hospital of Poitiers. At that time, the General Hospital of Poitiers shelters about 400 beggars. It is described as a house full of trouble and never at peace. So it is not surprising that no priest has agreed to bury himself in the poorhouse, and that some clerics and advisors with good common sense have never stopped trying to convince Montfort not to go there. But we know the desire of Montfort was stronger, and while waiting to enter the General Hospital, Montfort gathers beggars and children in the shade of the marketplace to teach them catechism. He finds himself moving for the first time according to his own instincts and religious genius. And we begin to recognize the man whom people will call the good Father de Montfort. He comes among the poor as a bearer of peace in humble and authentic ministry. And he said, "I made it clear to the bishop that even in this hospital, I do not wish to separate myself from divine providence, my mother. And for that reason, I shall be content with the food of the poor and will have no fixed salary." And the result, he is overflowing with good health and tastes the joy of being in the poorhouse as one who serves. We could see that Montfort is making giant steps in his growth in wisdom, abandonment to divine providence, and joy to serve the poorest of the poor. No one can be closer to God's will and to the life and teaching of Jesus Christ than this vagabond, full of zeal and love for God. If we are to grow in wisdom, we need to be part of communities that challenge us. Wisdom does not grow by itself. It grows in community. Challenging communities, humble communities, and learning communities And through the different communities Montfort belonged to during his life, he grew in abandonment to divine providence, gentleness, care and love for the poor and the suffering, and desire for God alone. And this is growth in wisdom. So at this time, I would like that we will read, maybe you can read in mute microphone, that there will be no echo, but we can read together the Canticle of Montfort number 14 about tenderness of love. That is what he discovered, he developed through the different communities where he belonged. Every human being, says this great Lord, is my beautiful portrait, my true image. You touch me to the quick, to the very heart, whenever you offend him. I will avenge this insult on the great day of my anger. Charity contains with itself the most perfect holiness. It is the fulfillment of the law. There is no law without it. It is the only bond of virtues without which they no longer exist. Have a mutual love for one another, says St. Peter. There lies the essential point. There is nothing greater on earth. Love is the perfection of all religion. Here is my great commandment, says Jesus Christ himself to all of us, that you love one another tenderly in the same way as I love you. It is new in its gentleness, though it is old in its greatness. Why would we not love our neighbor? He is the vivid portrait of God himself, the masterpiece of his hand, a friend whom his heart loves, the brother of Jesus Christ, the temple of the Holy Spirit. Love with your heart and hand, and not simply with your mouth. Pour your arms into his lap. Let whatever affects him affect you. Friendship which is only in speech is a ridiculous decoration. You must love your friends, and nothing is easier in practice. But love also all your enemies. This is the most heroic act, which you really must carry out or lose yourself for eternity. So the question now is, what about us? We all belong to communities where life is not always smooth and easy, as we deal with different personalities and character. And we can think of our own communities, our parish community, the community of our place of work, all the communities we belong to. When we face the challenge of encountering others, when relationships with others give us tensions and fears, how do we react? Complaining? Avoiding others and running far away from them? Learning to love the unlovable? Thanking God for the opportunity to grow in wisdom? The choice is ours. At this time of the presentation, I would like to give you exactly 1 minute, not more, to try to think of those questions personally. As we know, at the end of the presentation, there will be a sharing by group. If ever at that moment you like to share any insight that you receive from those questions, you could be feeling free. So I give you exactly 1 minute before I continue. Okay, let us continue. The second part is to look at Montfort, who grew in wisdom through obedience. And again, we will look at 3 moments of the life of Montfort: when he was called by the poor, in Montbernage, and in front of Pope Clement XI. But first of all, let us remind ourselves that growing in wisdom, to grow in wisdom is not synonym of an accumulation of knowledge. It is not about knowing a lot of information about the Bible, but applying what we know about the Bible. Growing in wisdom is not only knowing God's truth, but putting into practice God's truth, no matter what. Wisdom is not just displayed in obedience. Wisdom grows in obedience. We don't really know the sweetness of obedience and the wisdom of God until we put his word into practice. In the Proverb 14, we read, "Wisdom resides in the heart of the discerning. She is known even among fools." So we can say that understanding, discernment, and wisdom are all linked together. But how do we get wisdom to reside in our hearts? Simply by hiding God's word inside it. The first event in the life of Montfort is when he was called by the poor. Sometimes God's will comes in surprising ways, and not always from the words of the authority. One needs to be attentive to the signs and movements of the Holy Spirit to be able to discern his call. And a letter was sent to the bishop coming from the poor of Poitiers. "Dear Bishop, we 400 poor people humbly beg you to send us our venerable pastor, Montfort, the man who has so much love for the poor. Please send us this angel. We need him." At the end of August 1701, another letter, this time from Bishop Girard, is sent to Montfort. "Our poor people continue to want you as their own priest, Father. I think I owe it to you to tell you myself that their desires make me believe that it is God's will that you live among them, if the bishop of your diocese will give you the permission to come here. I beg you, therefore, to be so kind as to ask this permission from him as soon as possible, if you consent to accept this proposal." When he enters the General Hospital of Poitiers, it is a festive and emotional day for Louis, for the poor, and for the whole town. The new chaplain is welcomed as a man sent by God. Montfort knows very well that crosses and contradictions await him there, but he accepts the sufferings and opens his heart in all simplicity to the poor environment of this poor Babylon. Montbernage. We know that Montfort did not stay that long in the hospital of Poitiers. So after leaving the General Hospital of Poitiers, and with an arrangement with Bishop de la Poype, Montfort begins his new mission in the suburb of Poitiers, dividing his time between Montbernage, Saint-Sulpicien, Saint-Savin, Saint-Radegonde, Sainte-Catherine, and the Resurrection. The people followed him in hordes and were so deeply touched by his sermons that they found themselves in tears. He conquered their hearts to such an extent that they were always ready to take part in all sorts of circumstances. And there he deals with simple people, those who count for nothing, and he feels a moment of freedom as he is very much at ease with these people. At the end of a 3 weeks mission in Our Lady of Calvary, a big celebration is prepared to symbolize conversion and renewal. Montfort succeeded to help people reconcile with God, and others to hand over indecent books and pictures to be burned during the closing celebration. What he doesn't know is that some parishioners will suddenly throw in the bonfire a ridiculous and exaggerated figure of the devil, and the celebration, originally made to symbolize purification and renewal of hearts, turns into a popular carnival with no more religious atmosphere and lots of impious gestures. As one priest witnessed the event, the reaction is fast to arise. Louis is asked to stop preaching. The crowd breaks up slowly, and he remains alone, enduring humiliation and the pain to know that the mission is compromised. And for the sake of peace of the diocese, Monseigneur de la Poype orders Montfort to leave immediately the diocese of Poitiers. Obedience. Before leaving Poitiers, he writes a heartfelt letter to his children in Montbernage to assure them of his deep love and to encourage them to continue deepen their faith and be witnesses of God's manifold graces to their neighbors. He writes, "My dear friends, pray for me so that my unworthiness and any bad will I might have will not place obstacle in the way of all that God and his Holy Mother wish to accomplish through my ministry. The path to true wisdom is not doing what we want. It is doing what God wants. Even if no one else understands, we can say submissive obedience is a path to wisdom." But in the light of this torment, Louis Grignon, the tree rooted in rock, will find his own personal secret of sanctity. And the last part of this second part, in front of Pope Clement XI, after 5 years of priesthood, generously open to all the demands of the mission, but full of contradictions, Montfort is dreaming of far mission and decides to go to Rome to meet the Pope and ask his blessing to leave France and go to Canada. As usual, he is ready to obey whatever Pope Clement XI will be asking him. His love for Christ's wisdom impels him to be obedient to God's will, expressed by the words of the authority. Louis becomes a pilgrim on the roads traveled by so many pilgrims going to Rome. Abandoned to divine providence, he only brings with him a beggar's pouch, a Bible, a walking stick, and his rosary. The journey is long and hard, as Italy and France are at war, and on the empty roads with his companion, he finds nobody to offer them food. On June 6, 1706, Louis, trembling with reverence, finds himself at the feet of the Pope, the humble pastor with a welcoming face. Louis-Marie explained the reason for his coming, summarizes briefly his personal history, his ardent desire, and his readiness to do anything that may be asked of him. And we know very well the answer of the Pope. "You have, Father, a large enough scope for your zeal in France. Do not go elsewhere, but work always in perfect submission to the bishops of the dioceses into which you will be called. By this means, God will bless all you do." And Pope Clement XI gives Montfort the title of Apostolic Missionary. Though he may have been disappointed with the words of Pope and his refusal to send him to far missions, Montfort holds on to his fundamental inspiration, wisdom's love revealed in Christ obedient and crucified. He lives fully the holy slavery of Mary and his total yes to God's will. Obedience to God is essential to spiritual growth. As a Christian, obedience to God should be at the center of our life. It is the cornerstone of our relationship with God, and it is essential for our spiritual growth. Being obedient to God means following his teaching and commandments, even when it is difficult and uncomfortable, like Montfort did. Obedience to God is not only a way to worship him, but a way to get closer to him, prepare for whatever he leads us to, and grow as a person. Obeying God should not be a burden, but rather a joy, a way of worshiping him and growing in faith. Ultimately, we will feel most satisfied when we are in right relationship to God, which can only come through obedience. Montfort is a perfect model of pure obedience to God, and a witness telling us that this is the way to holiness. So again, let us look at the Canticle of Montfort number 10, what Montfort writes about obedience. Obey truly, and you save your soul. For your own will shapes hell and its fire. Obedience does away with that cruel sweetheart, who debases all and makes us perish once she interferes. The mark of one predestined is his obedience. The man who will be damned loves independence. All saints have trod this road to life everlasting. The baleful mind takes another path, as does the infidel. Obedience leads to a safe haven in the thick of a storm. It is a bark where we slumber as it sails along. It brings peace to us entirely in the midst of war, and uncovers by its secret ways a paradise on earth. Obedience is a secret, a secure highway for soon becoming perfect in little time and painlessly. Witness that saint who, after 5 years of pure obedience, great gifts received from heaven, and then immeasurable glory. See only God himself in the one commanding, and like a saint you will do what all God asks of you, and you will do whatsoever he will say, without complaint or murmur, and nothing will sink beyond your strength. Obey completely, that is essential. God so orders without condition. You must then comply. Keep all his commandments, and without distinction, everywhere and every time. If not, you offend him gravely. Do all you are told, if it be good and possible, without grumbling, without question, however harmful it may seem. Obeying gladly and with joy is a difficult matter. It is the most generous action of our whole gospel. Mary, sure refuge of sinners, all-powerful Queen, and most obedient of the handmaids of the Lord, drive out my own will and make me obey, that I may be truly saved and render you service. So again, what about us? What can we learn from Montfort's obedience? Are we prone to obey? What must we give up or sacrifice in order to be obedient to God in all things? In our daily life, what are the challenges to obey fully God's will? And has there ever been a time when God called us to something that looked challenging? How did we respond? I propose to you again 1 minute of reflection. And then again, at the end of our presentation, if you want to share about your way to obey, that you will feel free to do. 1 minute. Okay, let us continue for the last part that I was announcing a while ago. Montfort grew in wisdom through trials, and we know very well how many trials he had, but I choose only 3 moments of trials. First of all, when he was rejected and misunderstood, the calvaire of Pontchâteau, and under the stairs, Rue du Pot de Fer. Rejected and often misunderstood. In the first biographies of Montfort, he is described as an unusual example of someone living a poor, humble, mortified, and crucified life, and an unusual, extraordinary, supranormal, and superhuman character. This is for Grandet. Grandet depicted Montfort as someone constantly seeking opportunities for humiliation and for poverty, and as someone who did things that caused him to be thrown out of several dioceses. Montfort was a generous, passionate seeker of God, whose fervor and goodwill were obvious, but it was also obviously impossible for him to conform himself to an established framework. Montfort was never a troublemaker. He did not do sensational things to shock. His apparent anti-conformism was rooted in the absoluteness of God and in the radicality of the gospel. He drew concrete conclusions without being preoccupied with how they might affect him. Father Le Chassier, his spiritual director in the seminary, found him hard to understand Montfort. Though he showed an obedient willingness to seek and follow their advice, they found his behavior strangely out of tune. For Father Le Chassier, the ideal for a good ecclesiastic was to be found in surrendering himself to the balanced mold of the common rule. It had no room for fantasy and even less for extravagance. So one terrible trial for Montfort was when Father Le Chassier has a public rejection of him. Father Le Chassier no longer wanted to assume the responsibility of someone who was such an open source of embarrassment to him. Montfort had become fair game for the public rumor. They ridiculed him about his manners and the way he dressed. Father Le Chassier did not want to compromise his reputation and that of the seminary of Saint-Sulpice. And since Montfort refused to understand Father Le Chassier's letters of resignation, he chose to confront him publicly in the issue, in front of all the seminarians gathered at the vacation house. Montfort suddenly found himself alone. Humanly speaking, his life journey seemed to have come to a dead end. But Saint Louis-Marie even more intensely lived his motto, God alone. Oh, sorry. The last event in the second event in the life of Montfort, the Pontchâteau. The drama of the Pontchâteau explodes both in the life of people and the life of a saint. When the note from the bishop arrives, Father de Montfort's face streams with tears. These are perhaps the only tears shed so openly and humbly by a man who normally has such an iron self-control. Bishop de Beauvau forbids Louis to exercise any ministry in the Diocese of Nantes and orders him to keep distance from the Calvary. In fact, never to return on the site. Is there any bigger trial in the life of Montfort than this painful experience of the Calvary of Pontchâteau? Montfort's friend Pierre de Bastière recalls, I thought I would find him downcast and disappointed, but I was astonished to find him happier and more peaceful than I myself was. Then there is this dialogue between his friend Pierre and Montfort. Pierre, you are acting like a strong and courageous fellow. If there is any pretense in this, then it is all the good. Montfort, I am neither strong nor courageous, he replied, but thanks be to God, I am not grievously pained or desolate either. I am at peace. Pierre, you are content then that they have destroyed your Calvary? Montfort, I am neither content nor discontent. The Lord allowed me to have it built. Now he allows it to be destroyed. Blessed be his holy name. If it depended on me, the Calvary would have stood till the end of time. But since it depends on God, may his will be done and not mine. I would prefer, oh my God, to die 1,000 times than to oppose your holy will. Amazing. All the saints have experienced the cross in one way or another, but Louis' cross seems to be particularly bitter. But we realize that the image of the Calvary of Pontchâteau in Montfort's life is almost a sacrament, the humble transformation of man into God, worked by the mystery of redemption, into which Montfort has poured all of his strength. The more his vocation draws him onward, the more he appears to us as a man with empty hands. As he said, the cross of Pontchâteau must be planted in our hearts. And so Montfort moves along under, And so Montfort moves along under the banner of insecurity and contradiction, which mature him and links his life to that of his Lord and Master more and more every day. And the last moment that we will look at for the trials of Montfort in when he was under the stairs Rue du Pot de Fer. Only 3 years after his ordination, Louis, rejected from the hospital of Poitiers and from La Salpêtrière in Paris, experiences the dark night of the soul and the dark night of the spirit. In Paris, he has no place to stay, and he finds only a small alcove under the stairs, Rue du Pot de Fer, close to Saint-Sulpice Church. The man who has given all he has cannot be sure about the authenticity of his gifts. He starts thinking seriously to consecrate himself entirely to contemplation. But only one single passion sustained his prayer, God alone. One image is particularly fitting for this interior journey of Montfort, the search for wisdom. He writes to Marie-Louise, I know now by my own experience that you are praying urgently for this poor sinner to your heavenly spouse. Please continue, even redouble your efforts in praying for me. whether he sends extreme poverty or heavy crosses or misery or humiliations, I can accept them all, provided that you pray to the Lord at the same time to dwell in me and never to leave me for an instant, because I am utterly powerless. What wealth, what glory, what pleasure would be mine if all of these things would obtain for me divine wisdom, which I yearn night and day. In his stay Rue du Pot de Fer, Montfort wrote his main book, The Love of Eternal Wisdom, which represents the overcoming of his crisis and which grows out of his love and contemplation. As we saw, Montfort grows in trials. How we view the problems we face in life makes all the difference. We don't just solve the problems of life with God's wisdom. The problems of life are the way we get wisdom. Trials are not made to be desirable. They are meant to be profitable. We are going to be continually frustrated with God if we think that it is his job to keep us from going through problems. God's desire is not to keep us from problems. His desire is to mature us and help us grow through the problems. Sufferings and trials are things that we are meant to walk through in order to grow in wisdom. And for Montfort, two words apparently different become absolutely equivalent. To acquire and possess wisdom is the same as to unite oneself to Christ in order to follow in faithful discipleship to him. And again, let us look at the canticle number 103, when Montfort with all his heart wrote the desire of incarnate wisdom. Jesus, uncreated wisdom, come to me. Jesus, incarnate wisdom, come to me. What is sweeter than to be with you, but what hell to be without you? O wisdom, God made man, come to me. I acknowledge you, I call you, come to me. With you and your cross, I shall be happier than any king. O my powerful princess, come to me. O my charming mistress, come to me. To be with you bestowed more pleasure than our heart could ever imagine. O my immortal spouse, come to me. My beautiful one, my faithful one, come to me. With you, I am stronger than hell and death. O my greatest riches, come to me. O my sweetest tenderness, come to me. With you, we are so joyful, so rich and so happy. I burn with your fire, come to me. You are enthroned in my soul, come to me. With you and with your love, I am happy day and night. I yearn for you desperately, come to me. Without you, life is martyrdom, come to me. With you, I shall have everything, without fear of lacking anything. I tell you often, fearlessly, come to me. My soul will become holy, come to me. With you come all the virtues and the wonders of Jesus. And again, what about us? We cannot avoid having troubles and trials in our lives, but the question is always, what do I do with the problems and trials? How do I react when facing the many challenges of my life? Some people are angry with God. Others will even stop praying and going to church, saying that God does not care. So what can I learn from Montfort's deep faith, total surrender to God's love, and search for divine wisdom? And so before we will go to the last slide and our sharing in groups, I give you again 1 minute to think of those questions personally. Okay, let us continue with the last slide. With his own experience of growth in wisdom through challenging communities, through obedience and trials, Montfort offers us a difficult but rewarding path to follow. He was able to succeed in his search for God's will and happiness because he journeyed hand in hand with his and our Mother Mary. So this is the last slide of my presentation. We will soon be into small groups. And so for the sharing, either we can take what I was telling you with the 3 moments that I was giving you 1 minute of reflection about challenging communities, obedience and trials, or you can say that looking at Montfort's ways of growth of wisdom, what touches me, what challenges me, and what resonates with my own life.